decisions get made. I want to hear you as loudly as possible. Ceasefire now!
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 In our thousands, in our millions!
We are all Palestinians!
In our thousands, in our millions!
We are all Palestinians!
In our thousands, in our millions!
We are all Palestinians!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
London, make some noise! Thank you for joining us once again in your hundreds of thousands today as we come together to demand a full and immediate ceasefire and freedom and justice for the people of Palestine. At the start of 2024, the Palestinian flag flies high across the world. It has once more taken its rightful place as a symbol of liberation, as an inspiration and as a guiding light for everyone the world over who struggles against imperialism. Millions of people have filled the streets of every town and every city demanding peace and demanding justice. In every workplace, in every school, in every university, the struggle of the Palestinian people has been made visible. A fire has been ignited, and it is a fire that will never go out. Over the last few weeks, the dividing lines have become clearer than ever. South Africans who overthrew apartheid are fighting to stop the apartheid state of Israel from enacting its own genocide. And on the day that South African lawyers presented evidence in all of its horrifying and indisputable detail, what did Israel's allies in Washington and Westminster do? They bombed one of the poorest countries in the world. They bombed Yemen so that they could keep the weapons flowing to Israel. Once again, British planes fly where they do not belong. They fly from bases in Cyprus, a colonial enclave itself, which is also used to supply the Israeli military with weapons. The peoples of South Africa and Palestine are the very embodiment of heroism and steadfastness. They have taught the world how to struggle against racism and colonial oppression. Today, the brothers and the sisters of the children murdered in Sharpeville and Soweto lead the fight for justice for the children murdered in Jablaya, in Beach Camp, in Khan Yunis, in Shijaya. And tomorrow, one day soon, one day in our lifetimes, the brothers and sisters of those children will grow up, will learn, will bring new life in their liberated homeland. The imperial powers will never be able to divide us because our struggle is one. With the power of international solidarity, our movement won freedom for South Africa. Now it is time for us to win freedom for Palestine. During the anti-apartheid movement and during anti-colonial struggles all over Africa, there was one rallying cry that was heard throughout the streets, and I want us to repeat it today. So when I say Amandla, I want you to say Awaitu. It means power to us, power to the people. Amandla! 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 In our thousands, in our millions! In our thousands, in our millions! In our thousands, in our millions! It is now my huge honor to introduce our first speaker of this afternoon. Please give the warmest possible welcome to the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Ghassan Abu-Sittah.
Friends, sisters, brothers, Londoners, Britons, they thought after all these atrocities you wouldn't come out. They thought after 100 days of genocide, they thought they had normalized children being slaughtered. They thought you might get tired because your government is not listening. Yet here you are, in your thousands, in your tens of thousands, in your hundreds of thousands, coming out in bigger numbers, coming out stronger, coming out more united, coming out more determined. Every time the government is not listening, your voice grows louder, louder. This is the power of the people. We will not stop until we reach a ceasefire. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Until we have a free Palestine. Free Palestine. We wave the flag high. Wave the flag high so they see you. Raise your voice so they hear you. My friends, I stand before you with a broken heart. Every day brings fresh horrors from Palestine, and not just in Gaza. Every day there are mass murders, mass destruction, mass displacement, mass arrests. Every day we absorb horrific stories. I stand before you with a broken heart. For 3-year-old Ahmed Shabat, Ahmed lost his legs in an Israeli airstrike that killed his entire family in Khan Yunis, except his 2-year-old brother Omar. Omar and Ahmed are now orphans. They are among the growing number of WCNFS in Gaza. Wounded child, no surviving family. They survived, however, unlike the nearly 10,000 children Israel has killed in its genocidal rage. Let us vow for Omar and Ahmed and all the innocent people killed by Israel that we shall not rest. We shall not rest until their killers, their oppressors are brought to justice. To justice. An entire population is being starved, dehydrated, subjected to infectious disease. An entire population is sentenced to death. An entire population is being pushed further and further out of their homeland. I do stand before you with a broken heart, but I do not stand before you with a broken spirit. The will of the Palestinian people is unbreakable. Ours is a nation of freedom fighters. Freedom fighters. You know why? Because our history contains all humanity's history. And our future is linked to all humanity's future. And that's why this week, South Africa has been laying out its charge of genocide against Israel at the International Court of Justice. South Africa has presented a formidable case, and it has presented a formidable challenge to the world. Which side are you on? Are you for international law or for the lure of the jungle? Are you serious about all people being equal? The answer will impact generations to come. It will resound all around the world. South Africa's case is also directed at those complicit with Israel's brutality, the US and the UK included. The same countries who stood the longest by South Africa's apartheid regime are the very same countries who stand by Israel today. And my friends, let me say this. It will be a long journey to freedom, because you know, I know, as Nelson Mandela knew, a world in which Palestinians are not free is a world in chains. Let us break our chains. Let us break our chains. Let us raise our flag. Raise it high. Raise it high. And let us stand as one. All faiths, all backgrounds, all colors, and speak in one voice. Cling to your moral compass. That moral compass will preserve our shared humanity. That moral compass will lead us to a free Jerusalem, lead us to a free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters, Mr. Ambassador! Now, while most members of Parliament in that place should be hanging their heads in shame for their complicity in Israel's killing and for their actions in Yemen, there are a handful who do speak up for peace. And our next speaker is one of the strongest voices for Palestinian freedom in Parliament. Please welcome the MP for Poplar and Limehouse, Afsana Begum.
Thank you, Shelley. I want to begin by asking how many more people have to be killed before our government will call for a ceasefire. It's been more than 3 months. More than 3 months of us coming together in protest, of us demanding that the UK government use their influence to stop the carnage that we are continuing to witness in Gaza. More than 3 months of us calling for a ceasefire now. Since then, more than 29,000 people in Gaza have been killed by Israeli bombs. More than 25,000 children in Gaza have lost a parent. More than 50,000 Palestinians have been injured. New polling shows that 71% of the British public want a ceasefire. And around the world, the cry cries for a ceasefire grow louder. Today, on this global day of action, movements in at least 45 countries are participating, just like all of us are today, on these calls. In the face of this, the UK government's silence, complicity, and yes, aggression is unacceptable. At this time, when de-escalation is needed now more than ever before, the UK government's launching of airstrikes in the Red Sea in conjunction with the US is nothing short of horrifying. It's shameful, it's deplorable, it's beyond unacceptable. Rishi Sunak's move to attack Yemen without even as much as a recall of Parliament is beyond unacceptable. We know that further violence will not achieve peace. And it's not like we have not warned about this before. In 2003, we warned that the invasion of Iraq would set off a spiral of conflict that would fuel the conflict and misery of future generations. And we warn again now. Yemen is one of the poorest countries in our world. Civilians there have been striving for an end to the almost decade-long war that they have endured. Before now, the situation over there had already been labelled one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. So many are enduring starvation. That's why we stand here today and say to this government, not in our name. I want to hear you loud and clear, not in our name. It's disgraceful that the UK government appears to be putting profit over people, not calling for a ceasefire when thousands and thousands have been killed by Israel's genocidal actions, but appearing to act with aggression in the interests of international trade. Risking the prospect of further escalation in a region where they have already, according to UN reports, been complicit in aiding and assisting war crimes through the sale of arms. So I want to ask again, how many children are lying under the rubble in Gaza because of UK-traded weapons? Why won't our government stop sending arms to countries that UN experts have said may be being used to commit war crimes? And it's also disgusting that arms companies in the UK are being allowed to profit from the misery being inflicted in the region. But we know that this is not just about profit and trade, it's an exercise in imperial power. Our government may refuse to stand on the right side of history. They may not believe that Palestinian lives matter, but we will call them out for their double standards. And yes, we will continue to confront the threats of imperialism that Britain continues to pursue throughout the world. Arms sales to Israel must end immediately. Arms sales to Saudi Arabia must end immediately. And we will continue to demand nothing short of an immediate and global ceasefire. And that is just the beginning. A ceasefire is not peace, and a ceasefire is not freedom. Yemenis and Palestinians deserve both peace and freedom. Just as post-apartheid South Africa laid out to the world this week, the oppressed people of the world need lasting peace based on human rights and justice. That means an end to the bombing of Gaza, an end to the illegal settlements, an end to the 17-year blockade of Gaza, an end to the forced evictions, and an end to the indiscriminate settler violence in the West Bank. We have been coming together in protest for the last 3 months, and we will not stop until there is lasting peace. Please keep raising your voices. Please keep coming together, louder and stronger. And in Palestine, in Yemen, and beyond, the oppressed people of the world will be free. Ceasefire now!
for Sinn Féin, Mary Lou McDonald.
So hello, London. How are you all doing? There's a lot of you out there, and I am so proud and honoured to stand with you today. Together we stand with Palestine, united in our thousands, in our millions, an international movement for freedom and justice. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. We will not remain silent while Palestinians are slaughtered. We won't stay quiet about Israel's apartheid. We will not be silenced in the face of a genocide that is broadcast every day for nearly 100 days now. For nearly 100 days, the impoverished, dispossessed refugee population of Gaza have faced annihilation, a horrific crescendo of apartheid that has brutalized generations of Palestinians. For nearly 100 days, the mothers and fathers of Gaza have wept an ocean of tears over the still bodies of their dead children. Gaza, the graveyard of children. And the world looks on in horror and shouts for a ceasefire, but some choose to look the other way. Some believe that Israel can act with impunity, rain hell on a civilian population, decimate civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, refugee camps, terrorize children, steal their lives without consequence. And friends, perhaps that is the greatest obscenity, a long-playing obscenity. Israel seeks to justify its barbarity, calling it self-defense. Well, Netanyahu's government needs to know that nobody buys that. We see your lies for what they are. Destroying hospitals, cutting off water supplies is not self-defense. Displacing an entire population is not self-defense. Massacring children in their thousands is not self-defense. So the world now stands at a crossroads, and there is a choice to be made. You see, we're told that the world order is based on human rights, on justice, and the rule of law. Well, now we demand that justice, those human rights, that rule of international law for Palestine, for Gaza, for the West Bank. We demand that Israel is held to account, that the slaughter ends now, and that governments everywhere call for ceasefire. And the international effort has to now be for peace and for Palestinian self-determination. The Nakba, the Palestinian nightmare, has gone on for too long, and now we seek a new horizon of freedom, of peace and security. And if my voice can hold up, let me say this to the cynics, to the indifferent, to the belligerent, who say that this can't happen, that peace and Palestinian freedom is a dream too far. Well, I say this standing here in London, in common cause with you, having walked our own journey out of conflict, of building peace for 25 years. I say, this can happen, this must happen, and we will ensure that it does happen. Friends, this week South Africa has shown others what it means to lead, and now others must measure up. The case for an immediate, permanent ceasefire is now unanswerable. The refusal to support an immediate, permanent ceasefire is unconscionable. So we now reiterate that call. All of us, the many, demand that world leaders act now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Guramila Mahagud. Agus Bigi Mai. Shia Khan Agus Sirsha den Palestine. Long live Palestine.
Thank you, Mary Lou. As we know, our various trade unions have always stood in solidarity with the Palestinians. And our next speaker is the president of Unison, the union, representing over 1.4 million workers in Britain. So please give a warm welcome to Libby Nolan.
Thank you. It's a great honour to be here today and to tell you that Unison and the International Trade Union Movement stand united in our call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire now. We condemn the devastating bombardment and the violence of the last 9 weeks and stand in solidarity with all those that mourn the loss of loved ones. For all but 7 of the last 98 days, the people of Gaza have endured a horrific and indiscriminate bombing campaign that has changed the face of the territory beyond recognition, damaging, destroying over 60% of homes and leaving no safe place to shelter. Public services have been decimated, with only 15 out of Gaza's 35 hospitals partially, if at all, functioning, with severe shortages of health workers, essential medical supplies, shortage of health workers, essential medical supplies, fuel, food, water, clean water, sanitation, medication. The list goes on. Children and adults being operated on without general anaesthetic, no painkillers. It's horrific. At least 337 of my fellow health workers in Gaza have been killed, most as a result of the bombardment, the slaughter in Gaza, the targeting of health workers, patients, health facilities, ambulances, are serious violation of international law, which we utterly condemn. These are war crimes. This was a health service, a health system already on the brink of collapse before the 7th of October, due to underfunding and 17 years of a tight land, sea and air blockade. Now my fellow health workers are desperately trying to care for the 59,000 people who have been injured. As a nurse, I can't begin to imagine what they're going through, risking their lives every day and night to save others. We call on the British government and the world leaders to demand an immediate ceasefire and full access to humanitarian assistance. We demand an end to the occupation of this blockade and an implementation of the many United Nations resolutions that remain unheeded. We demand an international supported political solution that leads to peace, justice and a right to a viable Palestinian state. We will not stop what we are doing until we see an end to the killing. We will not stop arriving on the streets of this city until there is a ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Get those banners
you, Shelley. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Let us first of all salute the South African government, which has spoken for humanity this week in charging Israel with genocide. Now, we await the verdict of the International Court of Justice, but let's be clear, for the millions demonstrating for Palestine today around the world, the jury is not out. When Israel tells civilians to go to safe areas and then drops bombs upon them, when they block aid getting into Gaza, when they render northern Gaza completely uninhabitable, when the politicians say we want to get rid of 2 million Palestinians from Gaza, what we are witnessing is a genocide and we must stop it. Now, the only problem with the proceedings in The Hague is that the British and American governments should have been there in the dock alongside Israel. People say that the British government is allowing a genocide. No, that is too passive. The British government is arming the genocide, is politically supporting the genocide, is diplomatically backing the genocide, and the Sunak and Starmer are up to their waist in Palestinian blood. And on the subject of diplomacy, how much longer do we have to have in London the racist Israeli ambassador who calls from the river to the sea, Palestine to be Israel? Zippy Hotovali should be run out of town. Now, brothers and sisters, from the start we have said this could lead to a wider war, and that is what is happening today. There could be peace in the Red Sea tomorrow if Israel stopped its attack on Gaza. That is the root of the problem. But we are bombing Yemen to make it easier for Israel to bomb Gaza. We are not fighting for freedom of navigation. We are enabling genocide, and the Royal Navy needs to get out of the Red Sea and get back to Portsmouth. Now, politicians want to stop our movement. The latest idea from someone they keep in that Museum of the Living Dead called the House of Lords is that we should have to pay the police for the privilege of protesting for Palestine. Let me make it clear, we will never do that. Nothing is going to stop us marching because, brothers and sisters, those of us that do not have to pull our children from the rubble of their homes, those of us that do not have to watch our children eating grass because there is no food, those of us that do not have to hear our children screaming as they suffer amputations without anaesthetic, we do not have the right to stop, and that is why we will march for a ceasefire now, freedom for Palestine and imperialism out of the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. As we all know, the oppression of Palestinians have been going on far beyond these past 100 days. For 75 years, Palestinians have been suffering from systematic ethnic cleansing and have been living under an illegal occupation. And our next speaker is someone who has been campaigning against apartheid and for the freedom of Palestinians for over 26 years. He is the founder and chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa, one of the co-organizers of today's protest. So please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Ismail Patel.
Let's start by cheering for the South Africans and say thank you to them for the ICJ. It is 100 days of relentless bombing and killing in Gaza. They have made millions homeless, injured over 60,000. There are 8,000 people missing, and Israel has killed 23,000 people. If we take the percentage of people killed in Gaza by Israel, it is equivalent of killing 750,000 people in the United Kingdom. Today, we want to make a stop to that. And there's a global protest across the world where over 120 cities have gathered together, where millions of people are marching and demanding an end to genocide. However, while we are standing here, our politicians in the UK and US are beating the drums of war once again. Hence, today, we stand at a very dangerous juncture. Either allow Israel and its allies to escalate the war across the Middle East, or we act and demand an Israel and its allies to the path of peace and justice. But be in no doubt, the reason Israel and its allies wants to expand its war, which it is doing across Lebanon, Syria and Yemen, because they are losing. They are losing the global war on media. The BBC and its ilk can no longer justify the aggressions by the Israelis. They can no longer help dehumanizing the Palestinians. Young people around the world are saying, we will not be silenced. They are also losing the economic war. What the boycott and the sanctions and divestments that is taking place, it is hurting Israel and its allies. They are also losing the legal war, and even the courts are catching up with them. The ICJ must rule to hold the alleged war crimes and genocide in Gaza, and we charge Israel with genocide. They are also losing public opinion. Decent people worldwide are saying, we will no longer accept the lies. Lies that Israel is defending itself. Lies that Israel is doing everything to protect the civilians. Lies that says Israel is the victim. Lies that says that this started on the 7th of October. I would also like to thank all of you. Thank you because it is your campaigning, your boycotting and your protesting that has helped stop this getting any worse. Because if it wasn't for us and people like us, Israel and Netanyahu would have ethnically cleansed the people in Gaza. So continue with our efforts, continue with boycotting, continue with protesting until Gaza stops. So free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Thank you very much, my friends.
Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Okay, before we keep going, I've got a very important announcement. Michael Sendell, if you could come to the back of the stage, your daughters are waiting here for you. That's Michael Sendell. Your daughters are waiting for you at the back of the stage. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker. She's the MP for Streatham, and she's been standing up for the Palestinian people in Parliament recently. Please make some noise for Belle Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you. You know, when I was at school, the first thing that my history teacher told us to write in our books was that we study the past to live the present with an eye on the future. But when I look at what's happening right now, I ask myself, what have we learned of the wars and genocide of the past if we continue to stand by and watch the atrocities in Gaza continue? We're no longer on weeks, but months, and over 23,000 innocent Palestinians have been killed, and the bombardment continues. We've had self-important men sat in safe countries, in their warm, comfortable rooms, behind closed doors, under armed guard, and through their action or their inaction, they've condemned the people in Gaza to death. And they call themselves our leaders and our governments, but around the world, millions of people are out on the streets, like you, in their towns and their cities, and our call is clear, that this is not in our name, 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 because we have to be absolutely clear that we are not case of the ICJ. You tell me that it's not collective punishment when millions of people are cut off from food and water and their shelter is bombed, or cut off from life-saving aid and necessary medical supplies, when cesarean sections are being performed on pregnant women and the limbs are being removed from children without anaesthetic. Entire generations of families in Gaza are being obliterated, and they've even had to create a new acronym, WCNSF, Wounded Child with No Surviving Family. And you know, every single day I learn something that makes me sick to my stomach. And today it was that the average age of a child killed in Gaza is 5 years old. Just 5 years old. They say it's about self-defense and that every country has the right to defend itself, and they do. But what threat does a 5-year-old living under occupation in the world's largest open-air prison pose to anyone? What threat are they? There is no nuance, absolutely none whatsoever. The atrocities have to stop now, full stop. And government ministers are here talking about not wanting a dangerous regional escalation and an increased loss in life. But how does our government hope to prevent either by joining airstrikes in the region? And how do they expect to support a just and lasting peace without our government calling for a ceasefire? Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! And I want everyone to remember that as we call for this ceasefire to ease what is the immediate suffering of the people in Palestine, that we cannot forget how all of this began, not in October, but decades ago with an illegal blockade of Gaza and an illegal occupation of the West Bank. And what we have to do in the UK is we ultimately have to recognize the state of Palestine, because without that, we know that Palestinians will never be free. So please, please keep coming out until all of this illegal bombardment, the continuing slaughter of people in Gaza is over, because they only have us. They only have us. We have to stand up for them. We cannot depend on our governments to do it for us. Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine!
Our next speaker has just returned from the International Court of Justice, where he's been standing shoulder to shoulder with the people with whom he fought apartheid in South Africa. He's now helping to fight apartheid in Palestine. He's the People's Prime Minister. Please make some noise for Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, everyone, for turning out on this global day of action in support of the Palestinian people. There are demonstrations in every major city going on today. And next weekend, there'll be local demonstrations all over the country. I'll be in Birmingham myself, but they'll be all over the country. Thousands and thousands of people have been killed because they're Palestinians by the Israeli occupying forces, and ever since this disgraceful and enormous bombardment of Gaza began in October. But there are many who suffered long before that as well. And if I may, I'd just like to recall the name of a brilliant young man who went to Gaza to support the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and tried to save children from dying in that process. And for his pains, he was shot dead while carrying children to a place of safety. He died exactly 20 years ago today. His name was Tom Herndl. People like Tom and so many others should never be forgotten in this awful carnage that we're witnessing at the present time. The carnage that is destroying life at its very self in Gaza. And as you know, this week, South Africa, who suffered so grievously under apartheid, have repaid the world for their solidarity against apartheid by showing their solidarity with the people of Palestine. And South Africa taking the case and application to the International Court of Justice in The Hague was to me a very poignant moment. I was there in the court listening with pride to the way in which South Africa and all of its representatives presented the most brilliant, logical, legal, compelling case to say that the attack on the collective population of Gaza, the expulsion of the people of Gaza from their homes, the destruction of their homes, their schools, their hospitals, and everything else amounts to the crime of genocide under the International Convention. It's now up to the judges, the International Court of Justice judges, to decide on that case. I simply say this: anyone who heard that case, who heard that submission, must be convinced that not only is the case just, there has to be a ceasefire now, and that must be demanded by the ICJ. I would also say this: the attacks on Gaza, 70% of the homes destroyed, the schools, the hospitals, and now more people dying from wholly preventable conditions because of starvation, of dehydration, and of diarrhea, and all these preventable conditions brought about by the destruction of normal life. 1 million people corralled into a small area around Rafah trying to survive. The ceasefire must happen. Justice must prevail. But it's not brought about by bombardment of Yemen, extending the war into Lebanon, the Red Sea, or anywhere else. As if there aren't enough bombs that have already been dropped on the Yemen over the past years by Saudi Arabia, supplied by Britain and the United States. So our demands, our international, our global demands, are justice for the Palestinian people. But our demands are to live in a world of peace, not dominated by the interests of arms suppliers and military thinkers. Instead, put the people first, human rights first, justice first, education first, sustainability first. We are a movement of millions. We're a movement of millions all around the world. Today, in solidarity with the people of Palestine, and every day in solidarity with the people of Palestine, and in solidarity to bring about that world of peace which we will see in our lifetime. Thank you.
Once again, give it up for Jeremy Corbyn. Over the past few months, we have witnessed the indiscriminate bombing of multiple hospitals in Gaza by Israeli forces. We have witnessed the killing of doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers by Israeli forces. And our next speaker is a reconstructive surgeon who has been working at the Al-Ahli and Al-Shifa hospitals in besieged Gaza. So please give a very warm welcome to Ghassan Abu-Sittah.
Very much. God bless you. Today, as we were walking towards this place, and I was thinking, what can I possibly say? And I wanted to start by telling you about Anas. Anas was a beautiful 13-year-old boy. He suffered severe burns to his face, to his trunk, and to over 60% of his body, along with his mother, when their house was bombed by the Israelis. He was a patient of mine in the burns unit at Shifa Hospital for over 12 days. After several surgeries, this beautiful boy died. Anas, like 10,000 other beautiful boys and girls, have had their lives taken. We are here first and foremost to honor them and to remember each one of them, and to make sure that this carnage and this death ends. If the world is comfortable with the death of Anas and many children like him, then this is no longer a world that we are able to raise our children in and live in ourselves. Yesterday, 400 Palestinian prisoners were released back into Gaza, having been interned by the Israelis. One of the things that they have reported is that Israeli forces have been torturing the 40 doctors that they have held, more than any other group within the people that they've imprisoned. This targeting of health professionals as part of a systematic and intentional policy to completely destroy all aspects of health in Gaza as a way of making it uninhabitable, so that the ethnic cleansing and the expulsion of Palestinians continues. This Nakba Part 2, as one of the Israeli politicians described it, hinges on the destruction of health systems. It hinges on the fact that the 57,000 wounded will be left to die of their wounds. All of this has to be stopped. This genocidal state and its enablers within Western governments have to be forced into ceasing the murder. Last night, just in the last 24 hours, over 150 people have been killed. This is Israel's real response to the International Court of Justice. It wants to speed up its genocide so that by the time it finally has to stop, there was no one left. I will not take too long, and I will want you to go home today, hug your children, and remember Anas. Thank you.
Please thank Ghassan. We are very lucky to be joined by our next speaker, who is not often in Britain, an outstanding Palestinian writer, whose words you may know, whose face you may recognize. Please welcome Mohammed Al-Kurd.
Hello everyone. It's an honor to see all of you. It's an honor to be here. The atrocities that the Israeli regime is committing in Gaza are some of the most horrific, brutal tragedies of all of our lifetimes. But this genocide is not without a culprit. Zionism is the root cause of all that is happening in Palestine. This is a moment for transformation. There have been 30,000 martyrs. This is our moment to transform the world. We must reject Zionism in all of our institutions. Because to be anti-racist is to be anti-Zionist. It does not contain multitudes. It does not have double meanings. It is not romantic. Zionism is apartheid. It's genocide. It's murder. It's a racist ideology rooted in settler expansion and racial domination, and we must root it out of the word. We must de-Zionize, because Zionism is a death cult. Zionism is indefensible. I want you all to continue marching in the street even as South Africa courageously and momentously takes Israel to the ICJ. We must not stop marching. Not now, not tomorrow, not until Palestine is free. I want to leave you with a few words from a group called Gaza Group. They write, "Today we declare unequivocally to stand on the right side of history. You must engage with tangible actions, not mere words. Fortitude, not despair. Strength, not fear. Language alone no longer suffices. Our safeguard against annihilation hinges on exhausting every effort to halt the massacre. Until there is nothing more within your capability to do, look intently into the eyes of the children of Gaza and convey this message to them. I dare you to look into the eyes of a Gazan child and tell him that you tried your best. Our day will come, but we must not be complacent. Our day will come, but we must normalize massacres as the status quo." Thank you.
Once again, give it up for Muhammad Al-Kurd. Our next speakers are here representing the Jewish bloc on today's demonstration. A group of British Jews organising in their community for an end to the occupation. So please give a warm welcome to Avia Sarah Day, Max Gerber and Richard Cooper.
I am here because as a Jew, I am against genocide and ethnic cleansing to my core. As long as there has existed Zionism, there have been anti-Zionist Jews. We have always been here, and we will continue to be here. We belong here alongside our Muslim siblings, and alongside all those who stand up for justice against the occupation. I am here grieving the murder of 30,000 Palestinians in cold blood. In 2019, I worked in Gaza City as a coding instructor. I am here fighting for the dreams of my students who are running for their lives from Israeli brutality. This is not a hate march. We are being lied to, and our fear has been weaponized. Standing here today, I feel courage. I feel the hope that we generate every time that we march, and I believe that we will win.
My name is Avia, and I'm here as a member of the Black Jewish Alliance and from the Jewish bloc. I have to be honest, there have been points over the last 3 months where I've wondered whether I will see a free Palestine in my lifetime. And in those moments, I try to remember my ancestors. I try to remember my ancestors, kidnapped from the shores of Africa, who survived the transatlantic slave trade. I try to remember my great-grandmother Lenny, who survived Nazi Germany, where both her parents and 6 of her siblings were murdered. I remember them because without their resilience and without their resistance, I would not be standing here today. I remember my ancestors, and I honour them here today, joining this movement as a proud anti-Zionist black Jew. To say never again. And never again means never again means rejecting the divide and rule tactics of imperialism, which seeks to elevate one oppressed group at the expense of another. never again means recognising that our strongest weapon is our solidarity. And that is exactly what we've been building on these marches, week after week, month after month, is solidarity. This movement is a working class movement. It's an intergenerational movement. It's a multiracial movement. And we will keep building and growing until Palestine is free and until all of us are free.
Richard Cooper, Jewish Voice for Labour, Jews for Justice for Palestinians, and the Jewish Bloc. Proud to be here. Proud to be standing with you and saying this war on Gaza is not in our name. Anti-Semitism is a scourge. It's a form of racism, and we are all opposed to it. And any manifestations of it need to be opposed vigorously by the solidarity movement. There is some anti-Semitism today, but when you look at what is being classified as anti-Semitism, it includes us. It includes the solidarity movement. It includes criticism of Israel. It includes anti-Zionism. It includes calling for an end to the war on Gaza. That is not anti-Semitism. It is cynical manipulation. So too with the Holocaust. The lesson of the Holocaust that we draw was never again to anyone. Israel is perpetrating something that looks remarkably like a genocide in Gaza. I take my hat off to the South African government and its presentation at the International Court of Justice. They were given short shrift in reporting by the British media, and I would urge every one of you to look at the videos of the South African testimony to the International Court. It is devastating. I want to say about the Jewish communal leaders who stand foursquare with Israel. The chief rabbi who said a few days ago that he supported our heroic soldiers, our soldiers, the Israelis fighting in Gaza. They are not my soldiers. Communal institutions who claim that all Jews support Israel are playing a dangerous game. They are aligning Jews with Zionism. They are making every one of us responsible for Israel's crimes. We are not, and we oppose them and Israel vigorously in its genocidal actions in Gaza. Finally, I would like to say, or to read quickly, a poem which you've heard before by Khalid Juma, O Rascal Children of Gaza. It expresses the humanity we feel when we witness the slaughter of ordinary civilians in the name, says Israel, of preventing a genocide. It is double-speak of the most appalling kind, and Khalid Juma captures the humanity that we need to reach into ourselves to find. He writes, O rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturb me with your screams under my window, you who filled every morning with rush and chaos, you who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony, come back and scream as you want, and break all the vases, steal all the flowers. Come back, just come back. Free, free Palestine! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Thank you very much.